Subuser, which is a project that you can read about at subuser.org. I don't have the website up here, but you can also find a link to it at my website, which is linked on right here. Subuser allows you to run desktop applications in containers using Docker. So our desktop application is actually still relevant. After all, we have the cloud and everything. This is a desktop computer, as you can see. Hardly anybody has one anymore, I guess. Everyone's gone to using tablets and smartphones and laptops. Have you guys seen this diagram? I don't have the original copy of it, but I saw it many years ago when Microsoft was just trying to go cloud, which was actually a long time before Windows 8.1. It shows the spectrum of form factors that we use in our daily lives. We have mobile devices, we have laptops and desktops, and then we have televisions. And people spend most of their time consuming content, reading text or watching video, looking at pictures. And for this content consumption, we don't need to have an advanced way of interacting with our devices, with our computers. So it's natural that most devices are aimed at content consumption and they don't have good quality peripherals like keyboards and mice. But the PC is kind of unique, the PC being the laptop or the desktop, in that it's used to create content as well as consume content. And there's some unique attributes that it has. Content creation is unique in that content that the user creates belongs to the user, and they want to maintain control over that content, which means that they want to be able to save that content on their computer as a file. They also typically require low latency. When you're typing in text, you want it to appear quickly, which actually works in the web browser. But when you're doing anything 3D in CAD, you need it to show up quickly. And oftentimes when creating content, especially graphical content, you need to use peripheral devices like a stylus or a Kinect or whatever. And so if we look at the types of applications that are available, we have web apps, which we all know about. All of us have deployed a web app before. And web apps are great for content consumption. I can access the web app very easily just by typing in something in Google and finding it and opening it up in my web browser. And web apps can also be used for creating low-value content, content that doesn't matter to me much. Like, I can post things to Facebook, and I don't care if Facebook loses my content or sells my content because it's of no value to me. But for higher value content, I need another way of creating my content. I can, if I am in an enterprise situation, I would typically want to go to a private cloud application. And the reason why I would want a private cloud application is that I don't want employees to actually have full control of the content that they create. I want them to have limited access to that content so they can't leak that content, or lose that content, or lose their laptop and thus leak the content accidentally. So private cloud is great in the enterprise society unless you need low latency or advanced peripherals. But for normal mortals, we're stuck with desktop applications and all of their flaws. But as we see in this diagram, a desktop application can be connected to a large host of peripherals, microcontrollers, cameras, joysticks, styluses. It can also access the file system. These are all things that are basically impossible using web apps. And even as web standards evolve and there become things in HTML5, for example, for multi-touch, for touch, that evolution is very slow, and innovation in peripherals can never occur within the world of web standards. Because in order for innovation to occur, you first need to create the device, popularize it, and then you can create a standard. to interact with that device. So desktop applications will always be the first-class citizen when communicating with peripherals. High-value content isn't just about intellectual property. It's also about being able to back up your data and not having vendor lock-in. And so even if you're doing open source software like I am, my value is high. My content is high value. I don't want to lose that code that I've written. But desktop applications have a lot of problems involved with them. They aren't isolated, and so downloading a desktop application compromises the security of my computer. Every time I install an application, I give it full access to my computer. And even if I don't give it root access, I give it access to all of my content, which is the important thing. And desktop applications are hard to install. And they're hard to maintain from a developer standpoint. So I started the Subuser project with the goal of fixing these problems that I perceive that desktop applications as having. I've already explained to you why I don't want to just go to web apps. So I want to create applications that can be run in an isolated environment so they don't compromise the security of the rest of the system. I want to be able to do atomic updates. So when I update my system, I don't want to ever get into a partial broken state. I want to be able to roll back my system at any time. I want to be able to save a list of the applications that I have installed on my computer and move to a new system, and using that list, recreate my system without having to mirror my entire system. And I want to be able to update my system very efficiently. Currently, updates are exceedingly inefficient. On Windows, typically an update works by downloading an MSI file and installing the application anew. Or it's done by binary patching, which is a hack. On Linux, for example on Debian, which I use as my main operating system, packages that are updated, the tarball that holds the package is downloaded completely new. So my kernel is downloaded completely anew, even if there's just a 3-line patch in the kernel that only changed a few blocks of that tarball. From a developer perspective, I want to write once and run everywhere. I want my applications to continue working after I've packaged them, and I want them to continue working forever. On Windows, this is almost the case. Microsoft has worked very hard to maintain backwards compatibility, and they've suffered very severely for this, and now they're eating this pain for the rest of time. Linux has, I must apologize to Linus, because he would tell me that Linux has always been backward compatible, which is true. But the rest of the open source community has not paid attention to backwards compatibility. glibc is not backwards compatible, typically. And so on Linux, if your application has been packaged 6 months ago, it might not run on your computer today. I guess I would compare a computer program to a typewriter. So if I have a typewriter, I do have a typewriter in my attic that's like 60 or 70 years old, and I can still type on it. It still works. It still fulfills all of the basic functions of a typewriter. I can type text on it. And in no way has it worsened over time. But if I had a 60-year-old version of a Vim binary, I don't think I would be able to use that binary. It's lost its value entirely. And we must think about this as developers. Are we developing something that is going to last, or are we developing something that is simply going to be thrown away in 6 months? That if we don't maintain it, it's lost, it's dead, right? We've come to this status as developers of people that write code that if we don't work on it every day and upload new patches to GitHub every couple of days, people will say, oh, I don't think it's maintained anymore. I guess we shouldn't try it out and install it. Even if your application is perfect, if it's not maintained, your work is lost, gone. and for nothing. So I would really like to change that philosophy. We should be writing permanent applications, applications that work forever, and applications that we aren't going to be maintaining. We should be writing applications in a quality manner once. So a lot of systems have used a system that used one file per application, where all of the dependencies were bundled in the single file. This is a wonderful, simple system. The user can download a file. It has atomic updates, because when you update your program, you download a new file, then you have two files in your system. And you click on the one that you want. And it also has instant rollbacks. If you don't like the new version, you click on the old version. I think that some old versions of macOS had this, that you just had a file in your system. I seem to remember that. But one file per application kind of sucks, because it uses up a huge amount of space, and updating the program requires you downloading an entirely new file. I think that this can be solved very elegantly, however, with a content addressable storage system. This is a type of file system that creates a hash table for each block. Raise your hand if you know what content addressable storage is. None of you? I guess Pavel Schneider is not in the room. I guess he's left. Okay. So okay, content addressable storage does deduplication by creating a hash table. So you have two parts to your file system. One is the index that lists hashes and addresses in the block table, and the other is the block table. And so you have all your data stored in the block table. If I have two files that are very similar, then the blocks in the table will be deduplicated, and each file is just a list of hashes of blocks that the file contains. The hashes are, of course, much shorter than the blocks. So it's very efficient to create duplicate files in a content addressable storage system.
So can I add something similar to Foxer Venti from one line?
Yes, Venti is a content addressable storage system. So do you know Venti from Plan 9? I think you should definitely look it up. It's a great system. I use it for backing it up every day. So another technology is BitTorrent. And I would describe BitTorrent as a content addressable file transfer system. Here I have a screenshot of a BitTorrent client that very nicely shows for us how BitTorrent works. You see the blocks that you've downloaded already are in blue, and the blocks that you have yet to download are in gray. BitTorrent creates a tree of hashes. You download a hash for your file, and it follows this hash tree to create a list of hashes that your file is supposed to contain. And then it goes searching for blocks in the peer pool. So you can then ask for a peer to send a block that checksums to a given hash, and the peer will send you that block, and you've downloaded the block. If you close a BitTorrent client, then open it up again, you can imagine your file system is containing these blocks and not containing these blocks. And the BitTorrent client will automatically continue downloading the blocks that it doesn't yet have. But if you imagine a similar system in which this is your file system before you've updated your computer, and the missing blocks are the blocks that have changed when the software is updated, you can see how BitTorrent can be changed to create almost instant updates, where you're only downloading the very small change set of the blocks that have changed when the software is updated. So if you use CAS, content addressable storage, plus a BitTorrent-like content addressable file transfer system, then you're not wasting any space, and you have extremely fast updates, but at the same time you can have the simplicity of the one file per application approach, and you never have to worry about your dependencies being incompatible again. The other thing that I'd like Subuser to attain is application isolation. So desktop applications are good in that they can access files and peripherals, and they're bad in that they can access files and peripherals. Android has beautifully solved this problem with application permissions. Each application can be granted the permission to access a given peripheral, for example, a camera, or not. However, Android falls short of the goal of actually letting the user grant permissions based off of what the user wants. You either accept that Angry Birds can make phone calls, or you don't accept Angry Birds at all. What you really want when you install Angry Birds is you want to uncheck the make phone calls permission. Subuser lets you do that. Android doesn't because Google is horrible. The other problem with Android permissions is that there's no fine-grained permission for accessing the file system. Applications can save files to their own special file store, or they can access the entire SD card, as Google calls it. But there's no ability to say which folders an application should have access to, or the ability to say that the application should only be able to access files when prompting the user, or open. The thing that I like about Subuser is that if you open a file in LibreOffice, I have it set up so that Subuser grants LibreOffice access to that file, but no other files. As an aside, if you want to look at some more fine-grained file system access control, you can look at Sun Java WebStart, Java WebStart I think it's called, and that will prompt you before opening a given file. And they have a special file open dialog that has been integrated with the prompt. I think that the only problem with that solution is that it requires writing your program in Java, using the specific toolkit, and I think the biggest problem with that system was that it scared users, because it was, instead of interpreting the user's use of the file open dialog as giving permission, it prompted the user again after they had selected the file to open. And they should have just interpreted the user's selection of the file as permission to open it, rather than scaring the user by saying, "This is dangerous, do you want to trust this application to open this file?" So Subuser tries to attain the goals that I've just stated. Of course, it doesn't attain these goals yet. It's still a very much alpha software, but it uses Docker to try to get close. It is very easy for an application developer to package software for Subuser, because you're just writing a Docker file. There's a permissions.json file. It's a kind of, well, it's just a list of permissions, and the user can edit it. You have atomic updates and rollback. There's no CAS, content addressable storage, because Docker doesn't support that. I'm not sure whether I would like to see this content addressable storage solved directly within Docker as a storage driver, or if I would like to see it more generally as a new file system for Linux. I think perhaps it would be best to do the most general thing and do a new file system for Linux, because the technology is awesome and wonderful and everybody should use it. Subuser also has the problem that it uses X11, which is not secure. It simply gives the application the ability to interface with X11. I would like Subuser to use a secure method. Do you guys know about the evolution of X11 as a protocol? X11 as a protocol was initially a network-based protocol that you had thin clients running the X server that could then connect to a server that was running the application. Security was kind of sort of supposed to be there, but it wasn't. Then there was SSH, X11 SSH, that created the X11 security extensions. And security was kind of sort of supposed to be there, but it wasn't. And now there's a project called XPRA, which is attempting to kind of solve these problems. And XPRA is a great project, and I hope that they succeed. But last time I started a program in XPRA, the window closed after a couple of seconds and the program crashed.
Secure.
Yes, but it's secure. So once they solve the whole Windows closing and crashing thing, I will be very excited and I will implement Subuser to use XPRA. Of course, the other possibility is that Wayland will come along someday and stop being vaporware, and we'll just use Wayland and everybody will be happy and wonderful. Or we will use Mir, or we'll use whatever Android uses, because that's also supposedly secure, allegedly, I think. So Subuser, of course, does not use one file per application. Before I was telling you my dream of what would be perfect, but when I saw Docker, I was like, well, I can get kind of halfway there with one image per application. You have command line tools for managing your Subuser applications. It's kind of like apt-get install. You have Subuser add, Subuser add, I think. There's no GUI yet. I would show you a demo, but I forgot my keyboard, and the keyboard that the tech guy brought me didn't want to work with my computer. How much time do I have now? Okay, so I'd like to show you the Subuser website. Did everybody understand everything that I've said so far? Anything unclear? Any questions? No questions.
Maybe one question with the CS system. How would you do the rolling? Because like if you just binary changing the bits of the application, what would be the rollback process?
Okay, so you're not changing. If you have a deduplication system at the block level, then you can have two files that are nearly identical, but vary in a couple of blocks. And so the rollback would not be a rollback, really. You would just have two files on your system.
Okay.
But they would take almost the same amount of space as one file would. So this is the Subuser website. Any more questions? You had a question.
Yeah, I had a question. What about Windows?
Yes, so as I said before, Windows has the advantage that they have maintained really good backwards compatibility over the years, and so the need for Subuser isn't so severe, but there's still the need for isolation. But I don't really see Subuser as trying to have anything to do with Windows.
Yeah, I understand, but if it's an enterprise, this is something I've been thinking of for quite some time now. Some way how to isolate applications better. If you are in an enterprise security environment, this is something like a golden grail security.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well,
but I understand that it's kind of like that.
Yes, well, there's two projects that apparently have source code that works. One is called Cubes. Have you heard of Cubes OS? Okay, so Cubes OS has a Linux main virtual machine, and it uses Xen, I think, and then it can run multiple Windows virtual machines, and it can manage file transfers between them. It doesn't... I would say that, in a way, I don't really understand Cubes OS because, as I said in my talk, one of the main advantages of desktop applications is that you can use peripherals. And Cubes OS's approach to peripherals is, oh my god, it's a peripheral, don't let anybody touch it. So they're very hyper secure and paranoid. It works very well, and you can definitely try it out. There's another project that you'll find a link to somewhere on the Cubes OS website or on their blog that's used by the US Navy. but I think that's only used by the US Navy and nobody else is allowed to use it. I think that the company sold exclusive rights to its use.
So what's the current state? Which programs are you able to run under Subuser? I guess you can run, I don't know, a simple server listening on a socket. It's no problem, right?
So I run LibreOffice in Subuser. I run Firefox. There are some programs that don't work well with the X11 integration. For example, Chromium and certain graphics applications. There's a bug in Subuser that, for some reason, the automatic launching of dbus services doesn't work quite correctly. And so, for example, Liferea, which is an RSS reader, works just fine in Subuser, but the icons don't show up. You just see little X's where the icons were supposed to be, which is like, okay, I guess.
It's secure.
I guess the biggest problems with Subuser right now are that it doesn't have the secure isolation at the X11 level, because I'm waiting on some technology that would actually solve that problem. And the other problem is the general problem with backups. Currently, I have the ability to have a developer push an update. I'm sorry, did I say backups when I meant updates? I think I did. Yes, updates are not that great. I would like to have it so that applications could automatically check to be updated and rebuild themselves. Because we're using Docker files and we could do that very simply. But currently it's on a push basis, so the developer or the packager has to actually mark the application as needing to be updated. So if I can find my mouse, where is my mouse? Here it is. Okay, so in order to, do you want me to show you how to use, go through the website here, or how am I on time?
Yeah, well, how long would it take?
I don't know. I guess reading the website is kind of boring to you because you could always read the website if you're interested. So it's up to you. Do you want me to or not?
Yeah, I didn't think you have the privileges not to install anything.
I'm not going to do it on this computer anyways. I wouldn't. I don't like installing things on other people's computers.
SSH?
What?
You can SSH somewhere?
No. SSH isn't very interesting when you're talking about desktop applications.
Yeah, well, SSH is, so let's do it in the end if we have time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so because now. So, any more questions?
Yes. How many contributors do you have?
0.5. So that would be me. I guess one of the reasons why I made this talk is really a philosophical talk of what I'd like Subuser to be, is that I wrote Subuser. I think I did a pretty good job of it. It didn't reach the goals that I set out. And it works, I use it. And I'd really prefer to promote the philosophy rather than the application, when the application is really in alpha stage and is only for people that would be really passionate about the philosophy.
There was recently, I think, 1 month or 2 months ago, blog post by Leonard, system
Yes.
He was describing kind of similar ideology.
Yes. So Red Hat has a number of employees that are working on a number of projects that are very similar to Subuser. And one of the reasons why I'd like to wait on the X11 integration is I hope that they'll solve that problem. However, I do not believe that their system is as good as subusers, and I'll show you why. So if we go over here, and we go to the permissions.json file format, Subuser gives applications permissions to do things by having you write a permissions file. So for example, if you want the application to be able to use the webcam, you set the webcam permission to true. And so we had Skype working for a little while. It doesn't work right now, I don't know why. But we did have Skype working for a little while with the webcam permission being true. If you want it to be able to access the working directory from which it was launched, you set it to true, etc. You get the basic idea. This is something that you do before you launch the application, and it's a simple text file. You can figure out where it is on your system. The Red Hat approach and the GNOME approach to this same problem has been asking for permissions via dbus, either automatically magically allowing them without asking the user, or prompting the user, and I presume eventually saving those responses in G settings. And this is a very GNOME-centric approach, so it doesn't solve the problem of compatibility. It's like their solution to compatibility is it's compatible with GNOME, so fuck you. And
it's the red way because KDE is dropping from RHEL, and so you only GNOME-centric.
KDE is what?
KDE is dropping from RHEL.
Uh-huh.
For the official support. It will be still available, but will not have same support. It will have similar web but I think it's better for KDE because it will be updated more often.
But I think that the GNOME project will certainly get us some infrastructure, but I think it'll suck because it'll be very similar to Windows with the registry. You'll end up with some values about some permissions that some applications have somewhere in G settings, and you won't know where it is, and your best option when you want to clear out the permissions that you've given some malware will be to reinstall your computer. Whereas in Subuser, you have a permissions directory in your home directory, and you can look at the permissions file for a given program and delete it if you don't want that program to have permissions to do things anymore.
You have some security, for example, signing the permission file by my GPG or something like that?
No, I haven't done anything like that. It didn't really occur to me. I just thought that I would be like Android and just show you the permissions that the application has and let you accept them or deny them or change them.
But if I store them, I would like to have them secure.
Like to make sure that nobody's changed them.
Yeah. Some other app which I am running, which I'm, because you are container.
Well, I get what you're going for, but if you have your permissions files on your desktop computer, and somebody is able to edit the files in your desktop computer, are you already screwed in the first place?
Yeah. There's like second level of security.
That's okay. I think you would like Cube's OS.
Maybe it's protected from misconfiguration because you have to sign it again.
Yes. Okay. No, it didn't occur to me, and I haven't thought about that, no. Anything else?
Everyone's looking for a feast. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we have the refreshment break for 20 days. We can get the bar.